Chapter 5 of the Gita is called Karma Sannyas Yoga, which means the yoga of the renunciation of karmas. What has happened so far? On the battlefield, both the armies had stationed and blew their conches. Arjun asked Shri Krishna to take his chariot between the two armies. On seeing his own people on both sides of the battlefield, Arjun developed pity and became hesitant and despondent. He gave many reasons to Shri Krishna about why he should not go to war. From the 11th verse of the second chapter of the Gita, Shri Krishna began giving his discourse to Arjun. He talked about the mortality of the body and the immortality of the soul. After explaining this from the 11th to the 30th verses of the second chapter, the Supreme Being explained Swadharma. He told Arjun that his Swadharma, his duty, is that of a warrior, and therefore it's not right that he goes away from war, because he has to protect Dharma, and those warriors that get to fight in a war of Dharma are very fortunate, as there is no greater good for a warrior than a war of Dharma. Shri Krishna then began describing Karma Yoga in the 46th verse of the second chapter, and he also explained how one should perform works. He said that when one performs works with excellence, then they become yoga. Shri Krishna talked about the very nice concept of desireless actions, doing actions without desires. Then Shri Krishna in the second chapter explained yoga. Arjun had the question in his mind whether there can actually be a person who can perform this, who can perform yoga, and Arjun asked Shri Krishna in the 54th verse of the second chapter how he could recognize a person with all the qualities described. He asked how such a person sits, how he walks, how he speaks. In the last 17 verses of the second chapter, Shri Krishna described what a sthita prajna. Who remembers what a sthita prajna is? It's a person settled in intelligence. He described what such a person is, not by what the person is like on the outside, but in terms of his inner qualities. Shri Krishna then said that one attains this divine state of Brahmistiti, which means the bliss of God, then he does not get rewarded again. It is the point of no return. Shri Krishna explained very clearly that there is no greater good for a warrior than war, but Arjun did not understand this because he was in confusion. Therefore, at the beginning of the third chapter, what did Arjun ask Shri Krishna? He told him to tell him decisively the one thing that would lead to his good. The one thing that would lead to his good. Shri Krishna described Karma Yoga throughout the third chapter, the yoga of actions. Everyone is afraid of works. He said that Arjun said Krishna said you can't even maintain the body without performing works, and therefore Arjun would have to perform works. When one performs works, then bondages arise, yet one cannot go without performing works. Works create bondages, and bondages lead to new lives under the concept of reincarnation, but we have to repair our karmas. Is it impossible for us to escape from this cycle? Shri Krishna showed Arjun in the 4th chapter how one can perform works without bondages arising. Shri Krishna explained the only way to achieve this, which is yagna. He told Arjun to perform works as a yagna and for lokasangraham. Lokasangraham means for the maintenance of the world, because if he doesn't go to war, then bad people will win. But if he goes to war, he's upholding Dharma. It would be better for the world if he goes into war. Shri Krishna told him not to perform works for himself, but for other people. He told him to perform works for society and for God, and he would have to continue performing works. Shri Krishna said that if one performs works for himself, then bondages arise, whereas if one does not perform works for himself, then no bondages arise. This is the attitude of yagna, and this is the maintenance of the world. Yagna was explained in detail as involving 3 things. What are they, guys? Who attended the last few classes? What is yagna? Involving 3 things. First, Dev Puja means worship of the gods. Second, Sangati Karnam. What does this mean? Gathering people together for a noble purpose. And?
Charity?
Yes, Danam, donation, charity. So Dev Puja, worship of the gods. Sangati Karnam, gathering people for a noble purpose that we're doing today. And Danam, charity. That's what a yajna is made up of. The different types of yajnas were then shown in the 4th chapter. Yajna means to leave something for something great and to develop and advance yourself. Shri Krishna showed that when one performs works as a yajna, then bondages do not arise. How can one do this? Shri Krishna showed Arjun the way to this, whereby he should go to a person who has seen the truth and learn this from him. He said that such a person would show him and teach him how to perform works as a yajna. Shri Krishna said that one should go to such a wise person with what? 3 things. With humble reverence, he should do him service and inquire for him by asking questions. Humble reverence, service and inquiry. And by asking questions, it's not just any questions but inquisitive questions about spiritual knowledge. Shri Krishna says that this person is not a person who thinks about the truth, a person who talks about the truth, or a person who meditates on the truth, but someone who has what? Who has seen the truth. Such a person that has seen the truth will instruct you in wisdom, and you can think about what a person has said and then meditate on it. Then you can ask this person questions based on what you thought about. These are inquisitive questions. What's the reason for service? We explained in the last class. Anyone? Service is a byproduct. Through service, one gets close proximity with people who have seen the truth, and one gets a lot of wisdom through this close proximity. When we hear the word service, we think about pressing someone's hands and feet and bringing them food and tea. This is there, but this is not what's important. What is important is that you serve people who have seen the truth, then you get close proximity with them, and in that close companionship, the guru observes the student, and the student observes the guru. If the guru sees something that needs improvement in the student's life, then the guru tells the student what to change. Another word for a guru is acharya, and when one is close to a guru, then the guru's acharan or behavior is so good and so nice that the pupil incorporates this behavior into his or her life. Acharya Devo Bhaha. Acharya means God. The Jain religion has the Navkar mantra, which is a great mantra. It goes as follows. Om Namo Aryantaram, Om Namo Siddharam, Om Namo Arayantam. I bow down to Aryanta, I bow down to Siddha, I bow down to Acharya. Why do they bow down to Acharya? Because he practices what he preaches. His life is his message and not merely his words. This is a very great thing. Such a person has seen the truth, and when you serve such a person, then you see everything. Everything is in your sight. Such a person will give you knowledge, and you can use that wisdom. Then at the end of the 4th chapter of the Gita, Shri Krishna told Arjuna to cut with the sword of wisdom this doubt in his heart that was born of ignorance, to resort to yoga and what? To stand up. He told Arjuna to become joined to karma yoga. Let's go to the first verse of chapter 5. Chant it line by line. Arjuna vacha. Come. Arjuna vacha. Samyasam karmanam Krishna. Samyasam karmanam Krishna. Punar yogam cha shamsasi. Punar yogam cha samsasi. Yachaya etayor ekam. Yachaya etayor ekam. Tanme bruhi sunishchitam. Tanme bruhi sunishchitam. Arjuna said, you praise, O Krishna, the renunciation of works, and again their selfish performance. Tell me for certain which one is the better of these two. So at the beginning of this 5th chapter, Arjuna asks a question. The reason for the Gita is that Arjuna has asked questions and Shri Krishna has answered them. Arjuna does not ask anything new in this question. He asks the same question he asks in the 2nd and 3rd chapters, repeating the same question again here. Arjun asked Shri Krishna to tell him what would be the best thing for him to do, and this is not a new question. Arjun asked this question before in the first 4 chapters. In the 7th verse of the 2nd chapter, Arjun asked the same thing. Kalpayam yado aparafvaha panchami tvam dharmasa muchita yadshayasa nishita bruhitan me shishyastoham sadamatva pratanam. Meaning, my very being is stricken with the weakness of sentimental pity. With my mind bewildered about my duty, I ask you, tell me for certain which is better. I am your pupil. Teach me who am seeking refuge in you. Arjuna asked Shri Krishna the very same thing in the first verse of the 3rd chapter. Jayasi che karmaste mata buddhi janadana pati karma gore mam nijo chasike shava. Meaning, if you deem that the path of understanding is more excellent than the path of action, O Janardana Krishna, then why do you urge me to do this savage deed, O Kesav? Arjuna is saying that when Shri Krishna is telling him both about the path of works and the path of knowledge, then his mind is getting confused. He asks Shri Krishna to tell him for certain which is the better of the two and which would lead to the most good for Arjuna. Arjuna keeps saying these 3 words in these 3 questions over and over again. These 3 words are ek, nishchit and shreya. Ek, nishchit, shreya. What do these mean? What does ek mean? One. Nishchit, what does that mean? Certain. It means certain. And shreya, what does shreya mean? It means good. One, certain, good. Meaning, Arjuna asked Shri Krishna to tell him the one good thing. This is the foundation of the Gita. Who gets wisdom? If there were 3 rocks that were the foundation of wisdom, then it would be these 3. One, certain, good. The first is that one should try to attain that thing, one thing. If a person runs after many things, then he gets left behind because he's a jack of trades and master of none. Therefore, in life, always look at one thing. The fun in this field of spirituality is that one who attains the one attains everyone else as well. One who runs after many does not get any of them, and he even loses the one. Not just in the spiritual field, but also any field in life. If you want to achieve success, then you should run after one thing only. The reason why one runs after one thing is that the resolve is steady. One has to run after many things when the mind cannot decide what to do. When a human being does not know what to do, then he runs after many different things. He tries to do many different things and goes after many different people. However, when the mind gets steady, then it goes after only one thing. The second word is sunishchitam, meaning decisively. We are all undecisive because we shy away from making decisions. We are just bundles of uncertainties. Everything is uncertain for us. For a person who is decisive, everything is certain. This is worth thinking about a little in life. You must understand what decisive means. In everything we do in life and in every moment in life, we sit down peacefully and think about whether what we are doing is decisive, permanent, steady, dependable, and something you can turn to support for. If you ask these questions and the answer is yes, then it is decisive. If there is a flight at 11:45, then is it decisive? Will it come on time? Is it dependable? Will it definitely happen? In the same way, we have held on to things. Have we held on to things in life that are decisive? Are you investing your time in support of things that are decisive for your time, your efforts, and your life? Arjuna is asking Shri Krishna to tell him decisively because a lot depends on it. What happens in our lives is that everything is undecisive, and that is why there's agony. Peace is always there in decisiveness. The root cause of stress and turbulence in today's times is uncertainties. We are not certain. To explain this in a simple way, a person may leave his house at 8 a.m. in the morning, and when his wife says goodbye to him, he says that he's leaving the house, then she doesn't know when he'll come back today at 7 p.m., 8 p.m. or 9 p.m. This is indecisiveness. He does not come back every day at the same time, and this is where indecisiveness starts. When a child goes to study, then will the child come back with wisdom, When the person goes to earn some money, then will he achieve what he is able to achieve? This is indecisiveness. And when looking at it from the point of view of life, then the causes we have for happiness are all indecisive. What are the causes of happiness for a young child? What does a young child get happy in? Obvious. Yeah, exactly. Toys. This is a young child gets happy in toys. This is indecisive. The toy breaks and this child's happiness is broken. The child grows up and the cause of his happiness changes. What becomes a cause of happiness when you're in your 20s? Finding a life partner. He thinks that as soon as he gets this person, then he'll be happy, but that is not the result in reality. In fact, until he found that person, he was happy, but now he becomes unhappy. This is the difficulty. Well-behaved people understand this. Our favourite character, Kachalal, got engaged, and he would go out with his fiancée every night for a few hours. He would then tell his friends that they went out each evening. He looked so happy when he came back every single evening, when he talked about having seen his fiancée. This happened for 3 or 4 years. Kachalal's friends told him that he had been engaged for 4 years and that he should now get married. Kachalal said that he's thinking. His friends asked him what he's thinking about, because he becomes so happy when he spends time with his fiancée and all these few hours in the evening, and all his tiredness goes away. They told him that he should therefore get married. Kachalal said that he was thinking that if he got married, then who would he go out for a few hours each evening? This is because he was only happy when they went out each evening. This is indecisive, and all our experiences show this. A husband and wife live together for years, then the child is born. Now their happiness is dependent upon the child. The parents now say that their lives are for their children. When the children become 22 or 23 years of age, then the children get married and they themselves have children. The children start their own lives, and now these parents in the 50s say that the reason for the happiness is what? Their grandchildren. But then the grandchildren grow up, start living their own lives, and now they have no need for the grandparents in their 70s. Now who will these grandparents live for? These were all indecisive things. Arjuna is asking the Supreme Being to tell him the one thing, the decisive thing, and the good thing. Arjuna is not running after what he likes, but what is good for him. Look for the things in life that are good for you. Even if you do not like it, then look for the thing that is good in you. Look for the good. And when a person becomes steady in what is good, then his whole life becomes a great cause, and he sees pleasures only in those things that are good for him. He likes only those things that are good for him. At the beginning, he may have had to leave these pleasures for those things that were good for him, but then the state comes when he sees his pleasures in only those things that are good for him. This is the very name of resourcefulness, when one enjoys those activities that are good for him or her. How did Arjuna's confusion arise? Why didn't he want to go into war? When we understand Arjuna's question, we ask Shri Krishna to tell him decisively the one thing that will lead to him is good. Shri Krishna has already answered this question in the 2nd and 3rd chapters. Then what is Arjuna confused about? In the 18th verse of the 4th chapter, Shri Krishna described a person whose renounced works as karma akarma yapasaya, meaning he who sees inaction sees inaction. Commentators of the Gita say that Arjuna's confusion arises from this. In the 19th verse of the 4th chapter, Shri Krishna describes a person who has renounced works as gnana nigata karmana, meaning he whose works are burned up in the fire of wisdom. In the 22nd verse of the 4th chapter, Shri Krishna describes a person who has renounced works as yapachala badastvam, meaning he who is satisfied with whatever comes by chance. Arjuna understood all of this as implying that one should give up works. This is because when a person has a desire, then he makes a decision to perform works so he can fulfill that desire. But if a person has renounced all works, then he is satisfied by whatever comes by chance. In the 33rd verse of the 4th chapter, Shri Krishna said, Sarva karma kilam partha gnane parimpa, meaning, O scourge of the foe, all works without any exception culminate in wisdom. This means that all works calm down when they come to wisdom. In the 37th verse of the 4th chapter, Shri Krishna said, Gnanagni sarva karmani vasmat kurute tatha, meaning, even so does the fire of wisdom turn to ashes all work. From all these things that Shri Krishna talked about, he advocated the benefits of following the path of wisdom to renounce all works. In the 42nd and last verse of the 4th chapter, Shri Krishna said, Tasmadagnasa bhuta atisya gnanasatmana chitvaina savisya yogam atito tita bharata. Meaning, therefore, having cut asunder with a sword of wisdom this doubt in your heart that is born of ignorance, resort to yoga and stand up, O Bharata. Now, Shri Krishna is telling Arjun to perform works and to fight. Arjun is confused because he thinks that Shri Krishna earlier told him to renounce works and now he is telling him to perform works. This is like telling someone to first stand here still and then tell them to go run. How can one run in this situation? This is what the situation looks like to Arjun. On one hand, Shri Krishna is telling him to resort to knowledge and to renounce works, and on the other hand, Shri Krishna is telling him to resort to yoga and to fight. This is Arjun's confusion. If the Gita has an authority, not just in India, but all over the world, then it is Swami Ramsuktas. He's written a very beautiful commentary on the Gita, Swami Ramsuktas, and I recommend all those who understand Gujarati or Hindi should have interest in the Gita should read this commentary of Ramsuktas ji. Do not be shaken by the volume of it because it's a very big commentary on the Gita. Sadak Sanjeevani is written in Hindi and also has a translation in Gujarati. It is very beautiful, and Ramsuktas ji says that where this confusion of Arjuna has come from the 33rd to 37th verses of the chapter 4 of the Gita, Shri Krishna talked about going to see a person who has seen the truth and putting oneself at his lotus feet. Arjun would have liked what Shri Krishna had said in those verses. Arjun must have thought that, God, you're saying the right thing here, and Arjun must have thought over and over again, because Arjun's state at this moment is one of pity and attachment to his own people, one of confusion and one of despondency. He wished to hear something from Shri Krishna. He wanted Shri Krishna to tell him to leave the battlefield. As soon as Shri Krishna said what he said in those verses, then Arjun was inclined to fall at his feet and to tell him, God, there is nobody like you. Everything that Arjun has said, starting from the first chapter of the Gita, was with this in his mind. In the first chapter, he talked about the laws of a family. Then after hearing Shri Krishna speak in the second chapter, Arjun said within the first 6 verses of that chapter that he could not possibly kill his gurus and his elders. Throughout this whole time, Arjun has been looking for more and more reasons to leave the battlefield. When Shri Krishna talked about wisdom to Arjun in the second chapter and also about Karma Yoga, then Arjun said at the beginning of the 3rd chapter that he is confused by this. The root of this is that when an individual herself or himself are confused, then no matter how many explanation or examples another person gives, they still find confusion in this. This is the characteristic of a confused mind. Arjun is himself confused. When Shri Krishna was telling him to sit at the feet of a wise person, then Arjun thought that Shri Krishna was telling him exactly what he wanted to hear. But then, at the end of the 4th chapter, Shri Krishna told Arjun to stand up and to fight. Arjun is asking Shri Krishna why is he doing this and telling him not to do this. Think about it. If someone as great as Shri Krishna, God himself, is standing in front of someone and they still get confused, then what about you and I? If Arjun is still being indecisive with someone like Shri Krishna in front of him, then what about our indecisiveness? Arjun wants to make efforts so he can be decisive, have a firm resolve, and do what is good for him. Arjun interprets renouncing works as fleeing from the battlefield. Shri Krishna is talking about renouncing works from a larger perspective of life, but Arjun's perspective is very specific. He is only having thoughts about leaving the battlefield. When Shri Krishna is talking about renouncing works, then he thinks that his only work is to go to war, and therefore he should renounce going into war. Shri Krishna is not creating this confusion. In fact, Arjun is creating this confusion for himself in whatever Shri Krishna says. Such a Arjun is our representative. He is speaking our mind. When a person himself is confused, then no matter what the other person says, he finds confusion for himself in this. Listeners interpret speakers' words according to the thoughts that listeners have in their minds. Buddha always says that the discourses he was giving were being interpreted in as many ways as the number of people who are listening to him. The listener interprets the speaker's words according to what she has experienced in her life, what she has gone through, and what she has learnt. But the speaker says the words according to what he's experienced in life, what he's gone through, and what he's learnt. But the person who is listening to him interprets these words according to his life, his experiences, and his thoughts. Arjun spoke about his limited interpretation of what Shri Krishna said. When Arjun asked Shri Krishna to tell him what would be good for him, we must understand from this that both Arjun's and our minds are like ready decisions. Whenever difficulties come in our life, then we always go for ready decisions. In the path of spirituality, the path of God, and the path of the soul, ready decisions often don't work because each person has a different path. Everyone has their own path. We have the question of why Shri Krishna is not giving a ready decision. Shri Krishna says clearly in the 66th verse of the 18th chapter of the Gita, Sarva dharma parityaja mam eka sarvana vraja aham tva sarva papebhyo mokshasya yami machsucha, meaning abandoning all duties, come to me alone for shelter. Be not grieved, for I shall release you from all evils. Shri Krishna says with great clarity in the 18th chapter, but why does he not say the same thing in the 2nd chapter? This is a ready decision that Arjun should leave everything and come to Shri Krishna's feet, and he will release him from all sins. In the 38th verse of the 2nd chapter, Shri Krishna says, Neva papam apafrasi, meaning, thus you shall not incur sin. He said this so clearly, yet Arjun did not understand it. Even though he said it, Arjun had a fear of incurring sin. That is why Shri Krishna said in the 18th chapter that Arjun will not incur sin, and even if he incurs sins, then Shri Krishna will take all of them and would release him from all of them. Look how much confidence Shri Krishna has. He tells Arjun not to be grieved and not to worry. Shri Krishna also says in the 59th verse of the 18th chapter that if Arjun does not listen to him and leaves the battlefield to live in the forest, then this will not work because pravakti-stvam niyokti, meaning nature will compel Arjun to fight. Arjun would not be able to last in the forest because his nature is that of a warrior. Why did Shri Krishna not say the things he said in the 18th chapter also in the 2nd chapter? Anyone think of a reason? There is a reason for this. The first reason is that Arjun was not ready for it. Arjun had a mental state of surrender to Shri Krishna. If Shri Krishna had told this to Arjun at the beginning, then Arjun would have asked questions of this as well. Secondly, a true guru never gives a pupil a ready package of knowledge. A true guru always makes efforts to ensure that churning takes place in the pupil's mind. There was a very big thinker by the name of Kafka. Who has heard of Kafka? Good. He said that a book should be like a hammer that is used to break ice. Every scripture should be such that after years or even births of efforts, it breaks the bondages that a person has to doubts, fears, thoughts, and traditions. When milk is cold, then you cannot create butter from it. You have to heat it, boil it, and stir it, and then make the butter out of the yogurt. In the same way, when one wants to attain the butter from the milk of life, then this does not come when one is solid. There is only one use of solid things. They used to hit someone so that blood comes out their heads. They have no other use. Whenever there's been solid things, then blood has always come. When solid things get melted and churned, then butter comes out of them. A guru begins this process of churning. A guru creates circumstances so that questions arise in a pupil's mind. The pupil then thinks about it. Guruji always says that when a pupil goes to a true guru, then he should always be left with limits in his wisdom when he goes away. This is because when the pupil thinks that he knows everything and has had enough, then the relationship between the guru and the pupil will end. The pupil should always think that there are questions left to answer. He should always think that he has things to learn from his guru. He should have that sense of incompleteness. A pupil should never say that he has this complete knowledge as a certificate of this, because this certificate can only be given by the teacher. For example, when Buddha gave to Anand, his brother and his disciple, Apa Dipo Bhava, What does this mean? Apadipo bhava means you be your own light. When a pupil has had enough, then that day his search for wisdom finishes. Thirdly, Shri Krishna shows that whatever wisdom is given away ready-made, without efforts, inquisitiveness and penances, becomes very ordinary. There is not much meaning in that wisdom. One should have to go far in order to find out the answer. Shri Krishna gave the message of the Gita to Arjun, and we are all sitting down with a book that contains the message. After listening to the 18 chapters of the Gita once, Arjun became a changed person. All his doubts were removed, and he surrendered himself totally at Shri Krishna's feet. How many times have we read the Gita? There are so many people that study the Gita every day, and not many changes are seen in their lives. I'm not saying that reading the Gita will not change your life, and it certainly does, but very often not with the intensity with which Arjun changed. What is the reason for this? A thinker said it very nicely, that the bliss of knowledge that a person acquires with his own efforts, inquiries and penances is like the bliss that the person gets from seeing a flower grow in the plant whose seed he planted, watered and grew for 8 to 10 months. In the words of the poet Guru Kalidas, Kusuma Prasuti Samyasya Kaviya Sunatakam Ramyam Tatra Apicha Shakuntala, meaning like the bliss that one gets from seeing a flower grow in a plant one planted, such was the bliss that Shakuntala got. Does someone get the same amount of bliss when they are given a bouquet of flowers? Just seeing one flower grow in the plant that you have planted gives you more bliss than seeing a dozen flowers in the bouquet. Why is this? You have the experience of what is the difference between the two. The bliss one gets from wisdom that one experiences after years and even lives of one's own efforts, inquiries and penances is like that of a flower growing in a plant that he has planted. The bliss one gets from ready-made knowledge is like that one gets from receiving a bouquet. There is nothing wrong in liking flowers in a bouquet, and you should not throw them away, but it does not compare with the bliss of something that you have achieved through your own efforts. Shri Krishna knows this, and therefore he likes the questions that have arisen in Arjun's mind. Fourth, in order to remove confusion, a person must first admit that they are confused. In order to attain knowledge, a person must first admit that they lack knowledge. Nobody likes admitting that there is a confusion in their hearts. Nobody wants to say that they are confused. People like to say that they are very clear in their minds, yet when they speak you realize how confused they are. Nobody likes to say that they are confused. Whenever a person himself is confused, and whatever thoughts you give to that person do not seem straightforward to that person. When Guruji was young, they went to a fair and there was a stall that contained laughing mirrors. When you went to stand in front of the mirrors, then in one you look extremely tall, in one extremely short, in another you look extremely wide. We know how we are, but when we go in front of a bent mirror, then we also look bent. Even if the most beautiful person in the world goes to stand in front of a bent mirror, then they will look bent. In the same way, even if the clearest and most straightforward truth in the world goes in front of an individual that has their thoughts crooked, then this truth will also look crooked to that person. That is why it is first important to straighten the mirror of the mind. This is what Shri Krishna will do. First of all, a person should know about his or her confusion. This is the first difficulty a person has, and Arjun has come out of this difficulty. He said in the 7th verse of the 2nd chapter, Karpayoda Upabrava Panchamitva Dharmasya Machta, meaning, my very being is stricken with the weakness of sentimental pity. With my mind bewildered about my duty, I ask you. Arjun has admitted that he is confused. However, after coming out of this first difficulty, Arjun has created a second difficulty for himself. The second difficulty is in looking for a ready-made answer. This is a very big difficulty. If one goes as a beggar to the door of truth, then one has to come back empty-handed. A beggar can never achieve anything by going to the door of truth. A person that makes efforts can go to the door of truth and come back with something. You have to pay the price in terms of efforts. If you go and stand somewhere like a beggar, then you will never get anything out of the truth. You will never tell people to go somewhere like a beggar. If someone comes up to us and begs us for money, then do we give it to them? No, we tell them to go and earn money for themselves. If you're not even prepared to give 1 rupee to or £1 to a beggar in the streets, then will God give you the supreme truth if you beg for it? This will not work. God will tell you to make efforts. You have all the materials and equipment in front of you. There are so many scriptures, there is so much knowledge, and there's so many paths and so many messages from great saints. You yourself have to incorporate them into your life and work hard. Only then will you attain the truth. What truth will you attain? Shri Krishna will answer this in this chapter, chapter 5. Shri Krishna begins answering Arjun's question in the next verse.